It's the Fulhamish podcast, your independent voice of Fulham FC. My name is George Cooper and welcome to the show. How Fulham won that game of football, I will never know. After a bright start, we found ourselves 1-0 down at home, staring into the prospect of a frustrating league defeat to Brighton. We mixed things up, we battled, but nothing was coming off. It was looking bleak, but we'd forgotten one key thing. We do not lose at home to Brighton. The Seagulls are cursed in Southwest 6, and lo and behold, a Samu Chukwueze equaliser, incredibly harsh VAR decision, and a Harry Wilson free kick later, and our opponents managed to once again snatch defeat out of the jaws of victory. Smiles across the faces of the Fulham faithful. As for the travelling Brighton fans, I think it's safe to say they're going to think long and hard before doing the repeat fixture next season. Joining us today, they were both at the match, is Mr. Drew Heatley, our editor of the Fulhamish website. How are you doing, mate?
All right, George. Yeah, I tweeted out after the game, Ronnie Biggs would be proud of that robbery, which was one for the kids. Great train robbery, of course. I can't believe we came away with anything, to be honest.
I know. It just never fails to deliver. Fulham at home to Brighton. We also joined by my little brother, Freddie Cooper, taking a step up from the production seat into the hot seat on the mic. How you doing, mate? It's good to have you back on.
Yeah, cheers, George. Thanks for having me on. Just a fantastic weekend for Fulham all round, really. Results went our way on Saturday and Sunday, so fantastic.
Yeah, happy days. And we are joined by the one and only Dan Cooke. How you doing, mate? Fresh from the quick take last night. It was a joyous watch. I do recommend anyone who hasn't already seen it to check it out. How you doing today?
Yeah, doing good. It's one of those, as the game was sort of spreading through the late afternoon in London, I was regretting saying yes to doing the quick take. It just felt like one of those games where you have to just plodge up to Craft Beer Co, freezing cold, sit outside and unpick the bones out of another sort of pretty uninspiring loss, and then it was actually just great fun. So,
yeah.
So I was very pleased I said yes.
It was a really funny victory, I would describe it as. We don't get few victories fit the category of funny, but I think Saturday definitely falls into that category. Also, great use of the verb plodge, sort of cross between plod and trudge, I imagine. But yeah, no, it was. I imagine you skipped to the Craft Beer Co on Saturday.
Yeah. Plodge is actually a real word.
Is it?
It sort of means to go sort of ankles deep into the sea, sort of thing, right? Sort of just get your ankles wet.
Nice. Well, thank you, Dictionary Corner. I stand corrected. Drew, can you kick us off with some 3-word reviews, please?
Yep, I'll go to Twitter for this. An interesting bunch. You can probably imagine the different themes. We had Motor City, Fulham, so Fulham, Detroit, of course. Welsh Wizards winner. I like a bit of alliteration, so we get that one in there. James Wilson with whatever he wants, which obviously refers to Harry Wilson and his contract demands. I think what Harry wants, if reports are to be believed, is for Marco to stay. So this is all intrinsically linked. So we need to watch out for that. Josh Teplin with glad AFCON's over. And my personal favourite, Jack and Loz, stealing from Seagulls. I've got many a childhood memory of a seagull stealing all my fish and chips.
Very good. Oh man, it was it was one for the old Brighton scrapbook. Dan, let's start with the lineup. A couple of interesting things to note. Obviously, Alex Iwobi straight back in the middle, but I guess the main talking point was the fact that Marco chose to back Jorge Cuenca over the returning Calvin Bassey. What did you make of that decision? Obviously, Sammy and Jack discussed it at length on the Thursday club. Sammy was team Cuenca, Jack was team Bassey, and I was with Sammy at the Duke of Cornwall when the lineup came through, and he genuinely fist bumped the air. So a little insight into just how competitive Sammy James is there. But did you have a similar reaction, or was yours a little bit more measured?
Well, I mean, knowing Sammy James, he wasn't celebrating the fact that Cuenca was starting because that's what he wanted. He was celebrating because he was right. And that is the most important thing.
100%, yeah.
I actually didn't feel strongly about it either way, because on either side of it, I understood the merits of the decision. I think Jorge Cuenca has deserved to keep his spot and has played well in every game since Bassey's been out, I would say. I can't think of a performance where I really would mark him down below a 6.5, which when you consider that I think Calvin Bassey is capable of 9s out of 10s and 4 out of 10, you're probably hitting that sweet spot of consistency with Cuenca where it's quite easy to keep him in the side. Equally, if Calvin had come in, I'm fine with it because I enjoy seeing him play. I think he's a very good footballer. He had a great AFCON. So either way, I wasn't particularly bothered. And I think Marco, just in terms of morally, did the right thing. I think he picked the centre-back who's deserved to keep his spot. I think it puts a bit of pressure on Calvin Bassey to prove himself again, which could only be a good thing. So I think that was the only contentious decision in the lineup. And the rest of it, again, it felt like it picked itself weirdly, despite the fact we've got players coming back from injury. That felt to me like the only real rest of the team that we could see, barring maybe Kevin versus Sessegnon. But I think it makes sense having Sess on the bench because then you give yourself an option to either bring him on further forward or for Anthony Robinson, as we saw in the second half of this game. So I think Marco, pretty much for me, picked exactly the 11 I'd have gone for.
Yeah, no, I definitely hear you. And I think the one thing that was really a relief and nice to see was just, as you said, the strength that we had coming off the bench, likes of Chukwueze, Sess, if we needed him. But yeah, I guess, again, to the centre-back point, you're saying you're kind of happy either way. It's a nice problem to have, right? Strength and depth in that area. And I guess spare a thought for Issa Diop during this time. Fred, I thought Fulham were by and large the better side, especially for the first 25 minutes. We had a really good chance for Raul Jimenez, who, with some very intricate footwork, managed to get a shot on goal. It was a good save from Verbruggen. And yeah, we looked pretty much in the driving seat until, of course, disaster struck. Let's talk about Brighton's goal. Now, I think it's a sloppy pass from Iwobi that eventually gives the ball to Mitoma. He's then danced around. I think Wilson and Castagna could probably do better. And yeah, I mean, Ayari hit the ball really, really hard. And I think it's a difficult one for goalkeepers because the old cliche of beating at the near post, whilst sometimes it does undeniably apply, I think it's one of those where if Bernd Leno doesn't pull off a wonder save, then he is criticised, I feel. And I think it's a little bit harsh. As I said, he did hit really hard, but I guess you can't help but feel that Leno would be disappointed with that one by his very high standards. What did you reckon, Fred?
Yeah, I thought it was... I thought the whole kind of goal annoyed me at the time, really. As you said, Wilson and Castagna just not applying the pressure that is to the standard of the Premier League, in my opinion, when you got to play in the Prem and got to play against Brighton especially. They didn't close Ayari down anywhere near as quick enough, gave him the time to sort of pick his spot, which was the near post. And yeah, I feel like Leno, he's been great for us for a few years, but there's just a few mistakes creeping in this season. I feel that maybe a couple seasons ago he wouldn't potentially have. He gets a hand to it, but yeah, it creeps in. And I think after the goal, you could see that Leno was kind of annoyed with himself or maybe lost a bit of confidence because a couple moments later, he runs out and basically keeps the ball in play for Brighton, which was completely bizarre in my opinion, considering he could have just let it go out for a corner. But instead he gives it to Gross, and Gross puts a cute ball back in, and thankfully Castagna clears it away. But yeah, I thought we looked rocky after the goal. I think the goal really shook us up, to be honest. And maybe it was the fact that we thought we deserved to be in front in the first 25 minutes, because I thought we had great chances. And Cuenca's chance, I think, obviously Jimenez's one is the biggest one, and Jimenez should have just put it far post. I don't really know what he was trying to catch for Verbruggen at the near. But Cuenca just jumps too early from that corner, I think, and it just floats over the bar. If he jumps at the right time, heads it down, we've got a lot of players in that box, and I think it could have been tapped away easily by Iwobi or Wilson or whoever.
Yeah, it was especially rocky spell after Brighton went 1-0 up. Drew, I mean, as Fred said, nearly doubled their league on two different occasions. What do you think? It was this middle period of the game from about half an hour to about 65 minutes when we eventually equalised, where Fulham, things just weren't clicking. It just wasn't working. I think Carlos Baleba was outstanding throughout the entire game until he came off. He was just running the show. He had Welbeck causing all sorts of issues. Mitoma as well, who was notoriously quite streaky, looked like he was having a blinder. What do you think just wasn't clicking for Fulham during this middle period of the game?
It was weird. We were just extremely sloppy, and nothing was really coming off. It was just, and to that end as well, I think Brighton were doing quite well. They were fairly well drilled in what they were doing. It was a fairly sort of not particularly interesting, sort of messy middle of the game, really. Robinson didn't have a great game, and Castagna on the other side is, very, very functional, but not particularly interesting. So there wasn't much sort of impetus going forward. And Iwobi, I think, only came back in because of obviously Sasa Lukic's injury. I think otherwise there's no way that Marco Silva would have put any of the AFCON boys back in the starting lineup, I don't think. And you would think that he was warmed up and he'd be able to slot back in, but obviously he didn't have a great game either. So in that whole middle period, I just like Dan sort of hinted at earlier, you're just kind of thinking, well, today's not really our day. Nothing's really coming off. Are we going to sort of, after the heady days of the 6 unbeaten, are we going to have Leeds in this and have a little bit of a downturn? But obviously, no, it didn't prove that way.
Yeah, I think one of the areas where we struggled is Brighton pressed really well. We struggled to play out on several occasions. And I just started to notice a thing where it felt like no one in that team really wanted to stand up and say, like, right, I'm going to be the person who gets on the ball. I'm going to be the person who makes a difference. Because I think there was almost like a fear of, like, if I pick the ball up in this area, I actually could be at fault for giving away a goal if I lose the ball here. And there was just so many times where I would see our back line in possession of the ball and everyone running away from them. There was no one sort of dropping deep, offering. And I think that maybe is an impact of Sander Berg has spent the past month not playing alongside Alex Iwobi. And so he's had a little bit more of a progressive role and not had to sit as deep. Whereas this time he was with Alex Iwobi, who obviously wants to play a lot further forward. And it meant that they were both sort of pushed up a little bit too high. And I would have wanted one of them to sort of take the initiative and play that. What I think Tom Cairney does brilliantly is, I'm going to control this game. I think Carlos Baleba did that for Brighton, and we didn't have anyone doing that for us. And it led to us just giving the ball away a lot, going long quite frequently, and giving Raul a real sort of just scrap with Lewis Dunk and Van Hecke, which was a real tough battle. And it just led to sloppy football and giving the ball away constantly. We just couldn't get a foothold in the game. And I think Brighton deserve credit for that. But I think Fulham could have fixed that by one player standing up and taking the initiative.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of long diagonal balls that easily got snuffed out by the likes of Dunk, and it just became a bit like, oh, is this really, are we going to keep banging this drum? Just nothing was coming off at all. Dan, what did you make of Fulham's substitutions? So Robinson and Kevin came off on the hour mark, and Sessegnon and Chukwueze came on, quite attacking there from Marco. And then a few minutes later, Kenny was brought on for ESR. Now, on the quick take, you believe you said that it was as if Marco was trying too hard to try and bring Tom Cairney on, because I would argue that for a long time after that substitution was made, the substitutions didn't really seem to be working either.
Yeah, it just felt like there was too many moving parts, and it did ultimately work. We've won the game.
Yeah.
Whether it actually improved us, I'm not sure. I think the first double change was exactly what I wanted. It was the conversations I was having in the stand were get Chukwueze on for Kevin and get Sess on for Anthony Robinson, who again just had a tough game. And I think he'll be fine. I think he will get back to where he was previously. He's just been really rushed back into this role. If we think that he went from not playing for a really long period to having to start because Sess was injured, he's had no build-up of minutes, really, Anthony Robinson. And I think it feels like the right decision to me to bring Sess back into this side. But that change, I think, did improve us. We looked better with Sess sort of being sensible and smart on the overlap versus underlap, just a bit better in possession. Chukwueze gave us a little bit more of a fire and a fizz that Kevin was trying to do, but it just felt like nothing came off at any point. And then the Cairney substitution happens, and you just everyone switched position. So you had your left winger went out to the right wing, your right winger went into the number 10, your number 8 went out to the left wing. Everyone moved, and it felt like we weren't entirely sure whose role was what. And conceptually it makes sense, but in a game that's such on the fly, that's a hard change to make. But we did score like 4 minutes after it happened. And maybe that was because of those rotations, Alex Iwobi, instead of dropping in centrally, was pushed out wide. And I think it creates a lot of space suddenly in behind that Chukwueze is able to exploit. So whilst maybe on the face of things, like we didn't look a huge amount better, in the moments where it mattered, it engineered a win for us.
Yeah, it was an unorthodox system change, but it did ultimately pay off. Just before we come on to the goal, Fred, I want to touch upon Kevin. Another tough day at the office for him, I think. Not getting any joy, not making any real impact. Where do you see his place in the squad at the moment? Because it's getting to the point now where his confidence is noticeably quite low, and I can feel perhaps a slight frustration creeping in from big subsets of the fan base. What do you think we can do to sort of get his spark back, as it were?
I think he will come good. I just think this season's him adapting. I agree with Sammy. I think he's just a substitute. I think he's an impact player for this year. I think Marco's really wants him to get off the mark, and hence why he's starting him all the time. But for me, I think Chukwueze's more proven, and Kevin's just too raw at the moment for me. His decision making isn't completely up to the standard of the Prem, and that's fine. We signed him knowing that he would have bags of potential, and we saw glimpses of that against Leeds, and we've seen glimpses of that off the bench. I remember the Newcastle game when we lost 2-1 in the last minute. He was fantastic when he came on at half time, I want to say, and that's what I want to see of Kevin more, just off the bench impact instead of starting. I feel like he maybe thinks there's too much of a pressure on him when he starts on the wing. When coming on, that is his time to prove himself and be a hero. And he got his goal against Middlesbrough. To be honest, I thought and I hoped that would have been the kind of the step on to push on and get more and perform better. It hasn't really proven that yet. But it was another tough day at the office. The effort is there. That's all. That's what I'm happy about with Kevin. The effort is there. He's incredibly desperate to prove himself. It's just not coming off at the moment. It will come off. Next season is huge for him, and I think as fans we need to appreciate that. And this season's going to be just him bedding into the squad, him bedding into a new country, and all of above.
Yeah, I totally agree with Fred, and I think on that confidence thing, he's in like a really sort of vicious cycle in every game. It feels like when he starts, which is he's been given the responsibility to start. He's been given the opportunity to be a difference maker. So quite early on, he tries to make a difference. It doesn't quite come off. His confidence takes a hit. The next time he has the opportunity to try and do something, he starts to second guess himself. He doubts himself. He doesn't do the exciting option, the flair option that you want from a player like him. Like if you look at Samuel Chukwueze, and not everything comes off, but he has a fantastic ability to pick the right moments to do something unexpected or try something difficult, where even if it doesn't come off, the fans appreciate it. Whereas I feel Kevin's in a bit of a space now where he'll make a mistake or he'll try something and it won't come off, and you get a groan instead of like oh unlucky. You just get like oh not again. And I think it just needs to, as Fred says, have more opportunities off the bench as opposed to from the start now. And with these players back, he will get that chance. But you can see it sometimes. He'll misplace a pass, or a shot won't come off, or he'll miscontrol a ball, and he'll look up to the sky. He looks so dejected at times. I really feel for him because he just needs something. And I thought the goal against Middlesbrough might give him that, but obviously you get thrown back into the Premier League and you have to go up to Elland Road where it's pretty spicy up there, and then you get a game at home where your team trying to get back into it and can't get a foothold. It just confidence takes another pounding. So it's probably the right opportunity now to see Samuel come back in and Kevin take it easy for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean when you see his reactions when he misplaces a pass or a bit of skill doesn't come off. I mean, it was a misplaced pass on Saturday that ultimately got him hooked, because it was fairly like inconsequential. I think we had a good opportunity to have a break maybe, and he just misplaced it. And Marco went absolutely ballistic on the sidelines, basically there and then signalled for Samu to come on. And it proved to be a good decision in the end, because it was Samu who got us back into the game, Drew. I mean, it was some goal out of nowhere, completely against the run of play. I mean, what impressed you most about this goal? Was it the ball from Anderson from inside his own penalty area pretty much? Or was it the finish from Chuck? Because both were sublime, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, I'd like to talk about both, because we were talking earlier about how things weren't coming off these long balls, and then you could see a couple of minutes before Anderson's ball, they were getting it was going over them, and they weren't coping with it very well. I think it was the other side. Brighton's number 24 looks like a student on a gap year. I'm not sure his name. He's got the old the trendy hair, but he was struggling, and then it happened again. On the other side, Anderson, lovely ball to Chukwueze, who had to take a couple of touches, and I think that's probably what impressed me more. Was just obviously he still had to finish it. He had to take a couple of touches and then get it at the far post, slot it home, and he did it so well. And to do that, we're talking a lot about confidence with Kevin, but to do that for Chukwueze, who obviously fluffed his lines for Nigeria, and we all know how hostile that can be when it doesn't go so well for you on international duty. To come back and mark his return with a goal. Fantastic. BBC are like, and Samu Chukwueze with his first goal after AFCON. I'm like, yeah, it's like 3 minutes after his return from AFCON. It's like he played like a handful of games before he scored. But no, great for him. Really pleased. I'd love us to sort of give some sort of direction of travel about what we're going to do about that contract, because I'd love for him to stay. So many people are saying on Twitter and things, do we need to sign more wingers in January? Well, Chukwueze's not guaranteed to stay yet. I'm thinking of Iwobi as an 8 now anyway. Adama's gone. So yeah, I think we probably do. Like obviously Oscar Bobb's going to come in to provide some competition for places. That seems like it's going to be done pretty soon. So I think we do need some wingers, to be honest. But anyway, we have got Chukwueze at the moment, and it was a really fantastic finish. I was overjoyed for him.
Yeah, he had so much to do. The touch, and then running into the box to finish. It was brilliant.
Just for the benefit of anyone who is listening as opposed to watching on YouTube, I would like to say that Drew has just dished out some abuse to Ferdy Kadioglu, Brighton's right back, for having long hair while sporting the exact same haircut as him.
Not at all. I've not got the fringe.
I was going to say that as well. I thought, yeah, a bit on the nose, but
I'm not above being a hypocrite.
We do have lots of questions about our sort of going into the deadline day and the winger situation, Chukwueze, Bobb, Wilson. So we'll save that to part 2, because I really want to get into the sort of like the nitty gritty of what it is Fulham needs and what resources we have. But for the time being, we had the feeling on Saturday that things weren't going our way. Obviously, we got back into it, so overjoyed. I don't think I'd quite finished celebrating, and then obviously Brighton equalised almost instantly after we'd gone up. Obviously it was ruled out by VAR, much to everyone's relief. Now, Dan, it's very tight, and I just over sort of joyed with the feeling of like, it's nice to have one of them go for us rather than against us. But I mean, looking at the replay, you can't help but feel that we got away with one there.
Yeah, it's got weird similarities to that Liverpool one that counted at Craven Cottage, because on the still that looks down the line when the pass is played, I think he looks offside. Obviously, it's tight, but I think it looks to me like his leg is the furthest thing forward in that passage of play, past both defenders, Danny Welbeck. And then it cuts to the semi-automated offside weird 3D animation thing, and that suddenly looks a lot more like his shoulder is the furthest thing forward, and I just think those graphics don't work very well. The most sensible thing to do with that graphic, why are we looking at it from like a slight angle? Surely the whole point of like the semi-automated and creating a 3D model of it is that you can just adjust the camera to be exactly in line with the last defender so you can see any body part. And until you see that view, I have no idea if it is Danny Welbeck's shoulder that's offside or if it's his toe. Regardless, I said it on the quick take, he was offside. If he was offside, it was due to luck. It wasn't good defending. It wasn't playing, timing our the boys stepping up to play him offside. It was pure chance that as that ball gets played through to him from Matoma, is some part of him is in front of Ryan Sessegnon. It's unfortunate for Brighton, as you say. It's nice to have one. It's kind of funny. I feel bad for Brighton fans, but I also don't, because it's always funny when when see people say VAR's sucking the joy out of football. Like, you stole that moment from us where the crowd went ballistic. It provided me with a lot of joy. It only sucked the joy out for like the 2,000 of you in the away end. The 28,000 other people in that ground thought it was great that VAR overturned it, and it gave us a great moment. So you can't just say that VAR is robbing the joy from football because you weren't allowed to celebrate a goal.
That was the turning point, the whole entire game, though, because what a way that felt like the most devastating way to concede, like in recent memory, like even being dumped out of cups. And it was just because we were so lucky to get back into it, and then for them to score so soon after, it was the biggest sucker punch I can remember in a long time. And so then the joy of it getting chalked off was superb. But to put my tinfoil hat on for a second, I feel like the powers that be are creating such a discourse now where the regular fans in the stands and at home can't have a conversation about VAR anymore, because they're going to pull out something that you don't have access to, like, actually, here's our 3D graphics that show that Danny Welbeck's pubic hair was actually offside, or there's a 5 centimetre rule that we're only going to mention once, but we're never going to mention it again, and it takes it away from us, and we can't talk about it anymore. And it's, I'm like, is this manufactured? Like, are you just lying to us? I just can't understand it. That being said, loved it, hugged my friend like it was a goal.
I would also I think that to sum up football discourse around VAR perfectly, I tweeted saying if I was a Brighton fan, I'd be fuming at this. Tell me why I had a Crystal Palace fan reply to my tweet asking me what I thought about Crystal Palace's offside against Tottenham months ago. He was like, he replies like, if you think that's bad, look at this. I was like, I don't care, frankly.
Yeah, it was a massive sigh of relief. I was just so Fred's show notes that he kindly provided for me before the show. It says he's miles off. Well done to VAR for getting it right this time. Wink face. But yeah, no, it was a cat's whisper away from standing. Brighton made some interesting substitutions, which for me, Fred, was where they lost the game here. So they took Carlos Baleba, who literally covered every single blade of grass. He was everywhere, man of the match without a doubt, and brought on a 40-year-old James Milner. Now, no disrespect to James Milner, obviously an absolute Premier League legend, and England legend, like absolute consummate professional. But we were looking before going in of the things that like big events that happened the year that he was born. So we had the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. He was obviously born before the Berlin Wall came down. He's even older than our very own Drew Heatley, which I think is saying something. But I mean, Fred, a really bizarre decision from Fabian Herzler there.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. That's where Herzler sort of lost the game. Belieber was exceptional. I mean, Brighton just do it every time. It was Basuma first, sold Basuma for a massive profit, got in Caicedo. Caicedo obviously has proven that he is a fantastic footballer, sold him for a lot of money, and now they've got Belieber, and they've all done the same job for Brighton, really. I have no idea why that he took him off at this time. As a quick take, that I agreed with Dan, it was like he made those subs like they were 3-0 up. The game was 1-1. Completely, yeah, I did not understand it one bit, and neither did Brighton fans. And at the end of the game, I think we were all sort of focusing on the joyous occasion of us winning the game in the last minute and all that. But at Brighton away end, it wasn't ugly, but you could see a lot of fans frustrated with Herzler, and he just walked straight down the tunnel. I think Brighton fans have quite strong opinions on Herzler compared to Fulham and teams in and around him. I've always thought he's a good manager, but yeah, Brighton fans do get frustrated with him and his decisions. But going back to this game, yeah, completely did not make any sense. And I wouldn't say we we probably we got on from that and we took advantage of it. I thought it was Brighton's game to lose, and I was saying that as soon as the 4 minutes went up, I was like, take point. We haven't been great today. Let's put it down 1 point, and then let's go to Old Trafford next week. Taking all threes, exceptional, and up to 7th now. Couldn't believe it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was some bizarre decisions, as you said. Dan in the quick day, it was like they were 3-0 up. I mean, taking off Danny Welbeck as well, Drew, who was causing us all sorts of issues, came incredibly close to scoring with a header, I believe, and Leno pulled off a really good save to keep us back in it. But yeah, it looked as though it was plodding, as Dan would say, along to a 1-1 draw, which I think on balance would have been a fair result, if not slightly kind to Fulham. And then what happens? We win a free kick from quite far out. It was far enough out and not quite central enough that I'm thinking you can't have a crack from here. I don't know what you were thinking, Drew, but I was like, okay, let's see if we can figure out some little well-worked training move. And then up stepped Harry Wilson. Again, I think it's got similarities to the Brighton goal in that Brighton keeper manages to get 2 hands onto it, but again he connects with it so well. But it's one of them where the keeper's going to be disappointed ultimately. But can you just talk me through your celebrations, your mood when that goal hit the back of the net? Because it was one to add to the Harry Wilson scrapbook. He's providing us with some exceptional moments this year.
Yeah, I mean, it was just on the cusp of being able to take a shot, I think, and we got awarded it. And my mate, who's not a Fulham fan but comes to a lot of games with me, was like, "Who's going to take it from here then? TC?" And I was like, "No, mate, this is Wilson territory." And sure enough, he steps up. And you know what? It's funny because I often have this existential thing where we celebrate corners, and I'm thinking, why do we bother celebrating corners? Because we're shite at them. And then we celebrate this free kick that we've been awarded. Could we? And I'm like, probably not. It's been a few years, and just the celebrations, just that whooping of joy where you're just like, oh, we are having a laugh here. Like, just I don't understand how I'm celebrating a second goal today, let alone a first. It's crazy. Just absolute joyous, and yeah, I mean, to be honest, it was really well placed, and the keeper's going to be upset, but. Sometimes it just happens, isn't it? You can't be expected to save them all, and I couldn't give a monkeys. Fantastic for Wilson. I just think it's a shop window for him. That's the only thing. It's always tinged with a little bit of like anxiety, isn't it? If we was under a lockdown contract and was doing so well, you'd be loving it with unbridled joy. But it's got this little hint of, this is somebody else's. Going to give him a real big signing on bonus for every goal he scores this season for Fulham. They're going to give him a bit more. So, yeah, a bit nervous, but superb, and I'm so happy for Wilson. He's having a season of his life.
Yeah, I think Sammy joked that the man celebrating that goal the most was Harry Wilson's agent, and I think there's probably a kernel of truth there, Fred.
Yeah, also another great moment of it as well was just if you look back at the highlights, you can just see Lewis Dunk just in a ball of fury and anger. He's just like he's probably like the Brighton fans. It's like this like stadium, this club. I've just had enough of it, and he's just like completely lost his head from that goal, and it just makes me laugh so much. And the fact that he had his moment a few years ago when we beat him when we first went up. He had that calamitous own goal. It's just not a happy hunting ground for Brighton or him, and I think he just wants to see the back of us, and that's probably why they celebrated that game last year so much when they got that penalty in the last minute at the Amex, because I remember that and I was like, you're acting like you've just won the World Cup here, but actually I just think they've grown such a distaste to us because we've always had their number by hook or by crook. But yeah, fantastic, so good.
Yeah, I was at the Amex when that last minute goal went in, and you just collectively felt like this like elation from the entire Seagull fan base. They were like, ah! It was just this like release of tension that had been building up over the last 7 years or so. Just a little quiz for all of you guys. So we don't score many direct from a free kick. Freddie, you know the answer to this one, so I'll just shut this out to Dan and Drew. Last time we scored direct free kick.
I read it was Willian, but
Oh, well, you've seen it, yeah. Willian against Leicester. I was kind of hoping that one would have slipped through the net because it was a cross that bounced and then went in, so it might have slipped the radar. But no, well done both of you. I feel like your Fulham knowledge is undisputed.
No, my favourite thing about that goal is the celebrations of it. Obviously, like, you don't see anything from the back of the stand. You don't see the player celebrating because you just celebrate with everyone around you. But when you look at it back, there's a photo that goes up on social media, and I've watched the video. The first three people who are celebrating that goal is Harry Wilson lying on the corner flag, and then he just gets mobbed by Cess and TC. And just there's like a beautiful image of just like pure Fulham down by the corner flag. And that I feel like is really special. I think I speak about it a lot, and I think sometimes we take it for granted, but we've got a squad at the moment that is built up of such a lovely blend of like proper Fulham, but also like new players that we've like grown to love and have a real affinity for the club. And I think that's really important. Like we've been a team in the past that was just a bus stop effectively for players passing through for 1 or 2 seasons and giving it a little bit of effort and then moving on. But actually we've got a squad that really cares. Like as that ball goes in, everyone charges to the corner flag. Like Jorge Cuenca probably celebrated that goal more than anyone else. Like he's been here for, a season and barely played. So I think that's so lovely, the core that we've built up in this team.
Yeah, and it's all down to Marco Silva. Let's be real, over many years, and it's beautiful to see. You just feel the love, don't you? The boys coming back from AFCON and looking at the guard of honour that they got from the team, and like everyone mucking about. I love it, absolutely love it. Just on that, like a point of Fulham historically being a bus stop, it reminded me of. Do you remember when Slav was our manager a few years ago, and he was trying to sort of like challenge that notion, and he said in an interview, Fulham is not a train station, which didn't really make sense, and you kind of like gathered what he meant, but he just kind of got the translation just slightly wrong. But yeah, I mean, what a moment it was. I started watching Succession, the BBC HBO drama last night, and there's a line in episode 2 which really stuck with me when they're all watching a football match after work in the pub. And there's this American who just actually was like, why do you watch this? He goes totally off the back. It dispenses joy and misery at random. And I thought that is the most perfect description of football I've ever heard. And we certainly got a big helping of joy and Brighton once again. A big old dollop of misery. Just on that, I just thought, we got to spare a thought to Brighton. It was one of them where I think the celebrations, everyone sort of had their hands in their head, sort of like laughing giddily at how we managed to pull that one off. But let's take a little stroll through memory lane about the games. So Brighton have never won at Craven Cottage in the Premier League. 6 matches in total, 5 losses, 1 draw, which in itself is like, obviously it's not the best record, but it's the manner in which Brighton lose every single time, it seems. So we've got 29th of January 2019, Fulham 4, Brighton 2. Now Fulham are really bad this year, let's be perfectly honest, and they were 2-0 up at half time, and they just completely capitulated. It was one of Fulham's worst Premier League sides, I would say. We're talking the likes of Schürrle. Yeah, that year. 2020, fast forward, this is Parkable. This is the one draw that they picked up, 0-0. The first 0-0 at Craven Cottage for 9 years. Fred then highlighted this one earlier, Fulham 2, Brighton 1 in August 22, with the captain, leader, legend Lewis Dunk with an absolutely outstanding own goal. We'll put it in the show notes of this podcast if people want a little memory jog. Fred, do you want to just like talk us through? Because it was a real striker's finish, this goal.
Yeah, it's just, he basically gets on the end of it, but it's not like he's in the 6-yard box. He's quite far out. It's probably 12-yard penalties, kind of 12-yard penalty spot, but to the complete left of it. Ball gets flown in by, I want to say it's Andreas.
Yeah, it was Andreas.
Just completely beats Robert Sanchez. Hilarious. Wrong-footed him. And it's also the celebration of Dunk. He just has his head on the grass, doesn't look up for about 25 seconds. Fantastic. Also, the one that is my favourite is the 2024 3-0 when De Zerbi was in charge. 2 minutes straight, he had his head in his hands to the fact of they had the majority of possession and also the same amount of attempts as Fulham. Yet they walked away with a 3-0 defeat. And De Zerbi, I think that was when he was like do not ever want to come back to this ground, and hence he left that season.
Get me at Marseille, I'm done. And then, of course, last season we beat them 3-1. Matt O'Reilly, Brighton's record transfer fee and former Fulham player, with a goal coming in off his arse. So, yeah, not a happy hunting ground for the Seagulls. Do you think this, like, I just hope that this curse continues. I don't know how this has started, what like witch doctor the Brighton chairman bothered at some point, but yeah, it's really one that I hope continues long into the future.
I saw a couple of Brighton fans who they really tickled me on Twitter. One of them tweeted the day before, so on the Friday night, he said, "I've just got a feeling that tomorrow is going to be the day we finally break the curse." And then he put a little note at the bottom of being like, "But fully expect my head to be on Mars this time tomorrow." And he quote tweeted himself after the game and said, "Yeah, probably should have picked somewhere further away from Mars. I am never going back to that ground." It's just like, and then there was all Brighton fans who were like, "Yeah, it can't get any worse. Like, whatever happens, I feel like we've experienced the worst that Craven Cottage has to offer." And no, let's just find another way.
Yeah, you just like look back at the game, like the amount of like clear-cut proper chances that Brighton had, and then you look at the amount that we had. We had, as I said, the Rao chance early on, and then a free kick from 35 yards, and then like an absolute miracle ball to great. Like, I think those are I can't think off the top of my head of any time we ever came close other than those three. Yeah, I'd like to see the XG for that game. But yeah, anyway, let's move on to some of your questions now. As I said, we're going to come on to the situation with our wingers, notably Harry Wilson. So we've got a question here, Drew, from Options FC, who said, "Should we give Harry Wilson the keys to the cottage?" And then adding on to that, Hunt 2312 on Instagram asks, "Is there a high chance Wilson leaves?" Now, earlier in this episode, you sort of mentioned that you believe that Marco and Wilson's future are kind of intrinsically linked, and I guess, yeah, it seems as though if one happens, the other will follow. If you were to put on your or get out your crystal ball, how do you predict this one unfolding if you were a betting man?
I do think they are linked, because think what could be stalling Wilson from signing any deal. I'm sure financial terms are more than palatable. I'm sure length of deal. I'm sure it's all there because he's a player in the prime of his career and he's performing. So I'm sure that we're offering it. And I think he probably looks at it and thinks that our short-term future, for as long as he's concerned as a player and the span of his career, that our success and where we're going in that direction of travel is quite tied up with Marco Silva. So I think there's probably a lot in that. And then so it brings you back to that age-old thing about Silva and why is he not signing it? I'm not ITK, but from people I know who are, he wants to stay, Silva. So I think I think it could all be sorted out, but I feel like it's probably one of these things where it's not going to be until after the final ball of the season's been kicked, because for whatever reason, that's when Marco Silva wants to sort of address it. So I don't know. I think if one thing's taught us something, it's football's a cyclical sort of game, and if they both go, then we will come again. I write about it this week at BBC Sport. Like, I do think that they're together, they're all tied up, and if they go, it could mark the end of an era. But then you've got in the same week that we've got TC staying for another season, and he's seen everything. So, whatever happens, I think we'll be all right.
I could be really wrong here, but with Harry Wilson, what I haven't seen yet is a link to another club that concerns me. I think we feel like we're in a similar position here, kind of like we were in with Kenny Tete in the summer, of actually the teams who are willing to come in for him and give him a bit of a payday and some minutes, give him an important role in the side. I'm not seeing them as far superior to Fulham to the point where you would up sticks and throw everything away to go and take that opportunity. Like the teams I'm seeing at the moment, like Leeds, I know he was close to joining them in the summer, but we have there's no reason why we wouldn't be able to offer a similar amount to Leeds, and therefore the choice becomes who would you rather play for. I think he'd rather stay. I think similarly when you look at like Everton have been linked as well, and I find that very similar. Like, their fans can say all they want that they're a much bigger stature of club, but right here, right now, Fulham are above them in terms of quality. So it presents a better opportunity to do impressive things by staying here. I think where I will become worried if you start to see links at that next tier of clubs, like if you start to see Aston Villa, Newcastle, teams like that sniffing around, then I'm worried because they both have more money than us and more like a higher ceiling. Like you can really go and do incredible things at those clubs that you just simply couldn't do at Fulham. So until that happens, I think we still hold the control here that we can just say, yeah, if that's the amount of money you want and we're comfortable with it, we'll do it. So I think there's just a bit of a cat and mouse at the moment. I'll be worried if we start to get to April and you're hearing links to some big teams. But for now, I think it's just because he's in such hot form that people are so desperate for good news about him.
Yeah, I definitely hear you. Or like a move abroad to say like a Champions League competing side, and then I'd start getting a little bit nervous. But he just seems happy at Fulham, and he's obviously adored by the fan base. He's already written himself into the history books of this club for many iconic moments, and you can't help feel that there's more to come. And I don't know. I'd like to hope that Harry sees that as well. There's still a few more chapters in his Fulham legacy to write. Yeah, just on this, gonna chuck this one to you, Fred. So Kevin Webster asks on X: do we really need more wingers, or is a striker and a number 8 role more important to focus on in the January window? Now, Matt Hall also adds on to this from X. I think these points are all kind of linked. Playing devil's advocate, is spending 35 mil on Bobb, 25 mil on Chukwueze, 35 mil on Kev, and a huge salary on Wilson sensible? All our money on wingers when we really need a striker and a centre mid. Now, just before we recorded today, there was a report on Sky Sports that Fulham are closing in on that deal with Bobb, so it's looking increasingly likely that one is going to happen. I also want to add that, Dan, you mentioned on the quick take, and I fully agree with you, that are we staring the answer in the face with Chukwueze? We've got an option to buy at the end of this loan, I believe. Like, he's already performing for Fulham. He's proven what he can do. He's settled into the squad. He's part of it. You know, he's acting like a player who's been at this club for absolutely years. And I feel like it certainly looks, at least on social media, he's really happy here. Do we chuck all of our money at wingers, or are there other areas that we should probably be looking to get some reinforcements, Fred? Where do you stand on where you think, or how you think Fulham should spend this January?
I'd be lying if I said Oscar Bobb's transfer rumours and news is not exciting me. I've always rated him highly at Man City, and the fact that he's still there at 22 kind of intends that he's a very good player. A lot of Man City academy players get sold from the ages of 17 to 20. I know he had a big injury, but yeah, he's definitely got quality there. So I'd love to see Oscar Bobb there. Chukwueze, I've always said I think we just need to trigger that release clause of 25 mil. He looks settled at Fulham. I do kind of understand about the centre mid and striker thing. Personally, for me, Ricardo Pepi, I would wait until the summer. I know it's the World Cup year, but signing a striker for that amount of money when he can't even come in straight away is a bit concerning for me. With the centre mids, Hayden Hackney was always a player that I really wanted, but I cannot see Middlesbrough selling him at this moment in time. The fact that they sit second in the Championship, selling him now, and also with their owner, Gibson, he's a proper Middlesbrough fan. He will know how big a promotion will be for his club. There's no way he's going. I'd love to see Oscar Bobb, but for me personally, I think that will be it in the transfer window. I think the club will prioritise Harry Wilson's contract. And on this, obviously I'd love him to stay. I think he's been brilliant. But if his contract demands are so high to the point it completely messes up our whole contract wage structure at the club, I'm not too sure, because he's been fantastic, but that's quite a big thing to do as a club. And you know how players can get upset and players are egotistical. And I think that will not sit well with a few players if that does happen. but I'd love him to stay. Let's hope a deal can be arranged. But yeah, maybe we could invest that elsewhere.
Yeah, I totally agree with Fred, and I don't think what this team needs really is another winger, but I think there are a couple of arguments in there that, one, by bringing in another winger, I think you probably free up Alex Iwobi more to start to actually take on that number 8 role as his home in this side. Whether actually Marco Silva wants that or not, I'm not sure. I still think he doesn't like doing it. But I think that's what we want to see. Certainly what I want to see is him playing centrally, and then you create space out wide for players like Chukwueze and Wilson and Kevin, who give you a bit more of that drive, and you can keep your guile in sort of central areas. I like that. I also think the thing with Oscar Bobb, though, is that it might just be one of those deals that it's a market opportunity that you can't say no to. And you look at the squad and you think, is he exactly what we need? Is he the best? If we had 35 million to spend, is that the position that we need to spend it in? Maybe not, but he is the player that could, in 2 seasons' time, which I think has been spoken about, be worth 75, 80 million. And actually, it feels silly to pass up that opportunity. And so you make space, you make it work. And there's plenty of cases where teams have done that, where you think your squad's settled and maybe you need a central midfielder, but suddenly someone pops up and you can't say no to it. You just have to get them in. And I think that might be the case with Oscar Bobb. And, maybe you can also build versatility in there. Maybe Marco is looking at the squad he's got, and yes, he would love another central midfielder, but maybe there are enough internal answers there that by bringing in another winger, you just create space elsewhere for players to drop in, like Alex Iwobi. But maybe even, can you start to work Josh King and Emile Smith-Rowe together in the same side? Do we already have the answers for that additional midfield role? And I think that might be the conversation that's going on.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting deadline day, for sure. We're going to be obviously covering everything that happens on Monday's deadline day. We're going to do a special pod afterwards, or to wrap everything up as we did last season. But yeah, I imagine there are some surprises in store. That's for sure. I want to come on to Marco's future quickly. I know we touched upon it a few moments ago, but I just wanted to hear your take on this, Dan. So Alfred Duke asked on Instagram, is Europe what we need to keep key names like Silva and Wilson? And then Seb Ward also on Instagram said, do you think Marco will stay? Now, I know he said that, or Dan, Drew said that, I don't think we can expect any answers before the end of the season, but just want to touch upon the Europe thing. I've long felt this. I felt this about Marco Silva last year, to be perfectly honest. I thought if we didn't clinch Europe, I anticipated it would be Marco's last year with us. I just felt the sense of maybe he felt that he's taken the club as far as he can take it. Where do you stand on it? I don't know. I feel like the fact that he stayed this season has given me real hope. I feel like Marco wants to secure his legacy as Fulham's greatest ever manager, and I think in order to do that, obviously it would mean a cup win or some mad European run as Hodgson achieved. I'd like to think that that's the case, but I just wonder whether you feel like if we don't get Europe this year, we could be saying goodbye to our manager.
I really don't know. I think there's I agree with you. I think there's a stubbornness and a determination in him.
Ambition, right?
Yeah, it's ambition. And I don't think it's necessarily tied to if we do this or not, then he'll go based on performances. I actually think that it's almost a bit of a carrot for him that he's still chasing this thing. I think internally he wants to achieve these things with Fulham, and I think prove to himself to an extent that all of the effort he's put in at staying in one place for a prolonged period of time eventually pays off. It becomes his project. He had a couple of years here and there where he did some things and then it went sour, and I think he really wants to prove to himself that he can take a project from start to finish and do something that no one else has done. And so I don't think it's shit or bust this season still. I just think that there's two things that it plays on. I think it's one, you have to hope nothing more attractive comes up, and that's sort of out of our hands. I think if that Spurs job becomes available again, that becomes a concern. There are always opportunities in Europe that are going to be attractive to to him, because he's not English. He's a European manager who can go and do it in plenty of countries, because unlike some of the managers that we produce in this country, he's adaptable. He can speak more than one language. He can go and do it anywhere. It's not like he's trying to shift 4-4-2 from the Premier League into some of into Italy and France and Spain. So I think he would very easily step into a Champions League side. I think the other thing though that you can counter that with is, if you put a plan in front of him that he is on board with, I think you convince him to stay. We've said it for ages. It's not even put a plan in front of him. It's say yes to the plan that he's putting in front of you. He is sat in front of the board. He's sat in front of the directors of football, of ops, of everything, going, this is what I need. Give me this. If you say yes to that, I think you can bat away a lot of interest from other clubs, because he still sees, as I said, he still has this ambition to do something big with Fulham, and he believes he knows what it needs to get there. And I think you've got the option to keep him as long as you give him what he wants. The flip side of that is sometimes I think he probably is asking for unreasonable things. Mm-hmm. I think he doesn't always seem to take into account that we are financially dependent on going through the right motions, selling players that we need to sell to keep the books balanced. We can't go out and spend as much as we want because we are tied down to these financial regulations. And he seems to look past that sometimes and act as if they aren't a thing, which is unreasonable, and he deserves criticism for it. But as long as you say to him, yes, you can have the central midfielder you want. Yes, we will buy this player for you in July and not September. I don't think he's desperate to leave.
We had a question on exactly this kind of point in addition to those we had previously, Drew. I'm going to chuck this one to you. So Chris Harris asks on X, what would this team be capable of in the league if Marco got his wish for a full pre-season with early summer signings? Now, it goes on to what Drew was saying about sometimes demands might not meet reality, but I think it's a balance ultimately, right? But the start of this season, we saw Marco criticise the fact that he was getting players in so late. What do you think this team could achieve if Marco was to effectively be given everything that he wanted?
Well, you can see we're knocking on the upper ceiling of what we have been doing as a club for, 15 years, right? Longer. We're constantly sort of hovering around that 7th, 8th, 9th sort of area. We might not finish there, but for the majority of the 38 game season, that's kind of where we're at. So you can see that we're close. And it depends really, doesn't it? You look at somebody like Chukwueze who's come in and he's doing fairly well. Could he be doing more if he turned up earlier? Perhaps, but then there's also AFCON to take into consideration. And then we were talking about Kevin earlier. Kevin's struggling to adapt to the rigours of that Premier League game. We know he's got that. He's got that explosivity. He's got that natural raw talent. Did he need 2 months of pre-season at Motspur Park under his belt to hit the ground running more so than what he has done? I think it's probably hard to argue against it. So would that in turn sort of take us above where that ceiling where we're currently operating? We'd have to say that it probably would certainly help. So wouldn't it be great? But we know that that's not the way the club operates. So either Marco Silva has been here long enough to understand that, and he probably has more knowledge of the inner workings of the club's transfer dealings than we do. I mean, probably, obviously, he does. So you then could argue that he should be used to it now and then cut his cloth accordingly. I don't know. Like, if you can't change it, what are you to do? We've been banging our heads against that wall for the last sort of decade, but it's just not the way the club operates. The club operates on those last-ditch deals. They play the brinkmanship. They do all of this sort of thing, and they operate on that final day. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. You can't say it doesn't work in terms of the deals that we get. But take the ESR for example. He's having a much better season this season, but he could have had that last year. He could have gone further. I don't know. There's pros and cons to it, I think, and but it's hard to argue that we wouldn't be at least a hair or two's higher than we are.
Just one thing about the last minuteness, and this is we are getting too deep into the transfer strategy here. But I do think that as we evolve as a club, as we start to get to a point now where we're so established that we're going after players that teams don't want to sell, as opposed to picking up players who teams are desperate to get rid of. Your leaving it to the last minute, I don't think saves you as much money, because you're going to teams and saying, we really want that player, we'll give you this much. And they go, well, we don't want him to leave, so it's going to cost this much. That price doesn't come down anywhere near as far if that team doesn't want to get rid of them. It's like when you're having conversations with, think of examples like, West Ham about Issa Diop, like years ago. They wanted him shifted out. They didn't really have a space for him. So as you get later and later in the window, that price comes down and down as they're desperate to get him out, off the wage bill, get some money in. But you look at what we did with Kevin, Shakhtar didn't want to sell him. So they have no incentive to, on deadline day, to panic and go, yeah, fine, you can have him for 10 million less than we said that we wanted, because they don't want him gone. And I just think that eventually that strategy has to evolve in the same way that the club is evolving, that we actually going to have to throw our weight around earlier, because we're after players who are desired. We tried to play the game with Dewsbury Hall of, we'll wait and see how low his price drops. And actually Everton just come in and gazump it and go, no, we'll have him because he's clearly worth that amount of money. So I think that is going to have to change regardless of who the manager is.
Every time I see Dewsbury Hall play, I can't help but think, it would have been so good for us. It was a frustrating one for sure. I think whatever happens, it's going to be there's going to be some fireworks on deadline day, as there always is with us. And just on that note, I mean, after Saturday, I just couldn't help but feel like, how random has this season been? I feel like we've just been through every single conceivable emotion. It's been up, it's been down. We've been looking at the teams around the drop, thinking, we're going to slip into that, and then 2 months later, we're 7th in the table, looking very, very, confident. And I think the trajectory to me, whichever way you look at it, looks positive. I think So yeah, let's. I think we're going to have some real moments for between now and the rest of the season. Unless anyone else has got anything to add, I think we'll call it a day for now. Drew, did you have a favourite 3-word review for us, please, mate?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't look any further than Jack and Loz's stealing from Seagulls.
Nice, good stuff. I think we will be totally across everything that's happening in the aforementioned deadline day. So do make sure you're following us across all social media platforms. Keep a close eye on Drew's fantastically organised website. We've got our finger in the pulse at Fulhamish. So this is your place if you want to keep across everything this deadline day. Thank you very much for your time, gents. Dan, pleasure as always.
Thank you very much, George.
Thank you very much, producer Fred.
Cheers, George. Yeah, great laugh.
Drew, good to see you, man, as always.
Thank you, Coops. I'm going to get Jack Stradley to write a 700-word piece on Oscar Bobb as we speak, as that's going to be in the next 24 hours. So stay tuned to the website for that.
Nice, good stuff. Elizabeth and Jack will be back on Thursday, but until then, have a fantastic week. Come on, you whites.